welcome to our channel again. I'm so happy to be able to bring this information to you just so that you can basically be up to date with what is happening in Africa. We believe in a strong Africa, hence we say Africa Rising. So we are very much asking you, the viewers, if you like the content that we are giving you here, please subscribe to our channel, pass on this link to others, and give us your comments so we can create more content for you next time. I just wanted to talk to us today. If we understand that there is so much that is taking place in Nigel, a country that was once a French colony, and now it has actually abandoned all its relationship with France. I mean, people around the world do understand that there is uprising. There is some kind of a hatred for France in Western African countries, but a lot of people may not understand as to why this is actually happening. So this is the reason why I want to give you just a brief summary of what it says, the relationship that France has had with all these different colonies in Africa. Now you can see obviously the French embassy being invaded, burnt down, and the flag actually burnt, and any symbol that represents France in countries like Nigel is no longer in existence, and the French president ordered all the French nationals to leave the country. I mean, why? When all other countries that have colonized different countries in Africa, we're not talking about them. They are not a problem at all. No, their name being mentioned, but only France. Why France? Why France? And this is what I want to give you a brief summary so you can understand why France is the country that is so much hated right now in Africa. What we need to understand is the fact that when many countries, the colonizers, if you like, left Africa, France did not leave Africa. France stayed, very much wanted to still influence things in the West African country. And this is basically one of the reasons why it has run into so much trouble in recent years. But when you look back, when did it all start? So we go back into the 16th century. France wanted to expand itself, and then obviously it sent explorers who actually went into Africa back in the 16th century. They got involved in the slave trade. So they were actually taking slaves and sending them obviously in Americas. And we know about 1.5 million Africans were actually traded by the French. And of that number, about 200,000 did actually lose their lives while crossing the seas to get into the Americas. I mean, once the French started doing this trade, it got to a stage where they were very much just involved in slave trade. But at one point, they look at themselves, they said, no, they needed to feed the industries in Europe, and then they needed resources in order to do that. That's the number two reason why French actually began to get involved in the interior, in mainland, actually to want to use resources in order to send back to their own countries. And while France was also doing this, there were also other countries that pretty much wanted to have the resources and also get involved in the slave trade, and also wanted to colonize some countries. And then this became a theater where all these countries were now basically fighting in order who's going to control Africa, who's going to gain what, until Bismarck in 1885 called a round table in which they actually decided to put together what we call the Berlin Act. In that, it was actually described, or it was actually said, that all these African, they said to them, all these European countries, they say, why are they fighting against each other? What they should actually do is carve up Africa into different countries, and then each one of them will obviously pick a country that they would colonize, and then they send their armies into the African country, crashing and then basically destroying whatever stood on their way. In this way, they were able to take power, seize power from the local people, because back then Africa was actually the leaders in Africa were the kings, they were the tribal leaders, and the sultanas. They were the ones that were basically in charge, if you like, of governance, if you like, in Africa. But since then, we have seen that, it has progressed little by little until it got to a stage where the whole of Africa was taken over. Prior to this, 90% of Africa was actually led by Africans. that is the queens and the chief tribals and all of that. By the 19th century, it was now 90% was now controlled by the Europeans. And in the process of time, atrocities and so many things actually happened. But what actually happened when we got to the Second World War? Many countries after the Second World War relinquished their power and their power that they had over their colonies. They wanted obviously to grant them what they needed, independence, in order for them to run their own countries. But France never actually left. So France never actually left. So what did it want to do? France wanted to continue to have influence in the countries that they were actually ruling over, because France by this time had about 8 countries out of the continent of Africa. From the Berlin, like I said, from that round table, from that conversation, from that pact that they had, France came up with 8 countries, including amongst them would be Senegal, Nigel, Burkina Faso, Mali, and and then Ivory Coast and 2 other countries. So France, if you like, kind of carved itself out this territory, and then it began to use them as subject. So they will do pretty much French bidding. So they were basically being ruled from, if you like, Paris. So it was not the case that they were citizens. They were not citizens, but they were actually subject. And in this situation, we've also seen that France was able to use the Africans to go and fight wars for them. And many have lost their lives fighting for France. But yes, it came a time when every country, or most countries in Africa, were actually declaring independence. And like I said, France, even though France said in words, they said that they were releasing all these countries under its control, but it did not. So when de Gaulle came into power, so around 1968, de Gaulle put in place what we call France-Afrique, which is the arm or the mechanism in which France was still going to extend its power over these countries. One of the ways that it did is basically by using the French currency, which is CFA francs. So all these 14 countries in Africa that are using this funds or currency, they need to have their reserve, 50% of their reserve in France treasury, in order for them to have access to the currency and use it. And then they'll claim that, this is to bring about stability in that region. But you can see how all these mechanisms are being used to control. And through that France-Afrique relationship, what France was now able to do is to put in power leaders who were almost puppet and dictators that will do what France wanted. And then in return, what will they get? They get France aid, some little aid that they will get, and then they will get the glamour that, yes, they can be welcomed in Paris. And then they give them all these things that they wanted, even the military, if you like, support, just so that these leaders can stay in place and do whatever it is that France was asking them to do. And this is how this relationship has, if you like, developed. And in the process of time as well, France itself was, if you like, the third biggest investor in the Western African countries. So it had about over 1,000 businesses or companies that had contract in all these different area or spheres of the economy in these countries. But this is all France is doing, because it's, even though it declared that yes, you have independence, but yet it's still suddenly wanting to control what was happening in these different countries. And obviously the people haven't forgotten what the history looks like, how the French captain Paul Voulay actually killed and destroyed, massacred men and women and children, even seeing some women hanging on the trees, and the children that were mutilated, and the women that were raped during the time that France was trying to set up this colony. The people haven't forgotten that. They still remember that. So to this very day. Even when they look at the currency itself, it speaks volume of the kind of relationship that they had. So over the years, these tensions are growing, and the people are not really seeing their interests being promoted, but yet they're seeing one country that has over many years control their country, and they're still wanting to do the same, until it got to this point when they said, no, enough is enough. And hence the reason, I mean, this does not justify the coup that has taken place, but at least it gives you an idea as to why the people actually don't want France to continue doing what they've done in the past. So we actually understand what's actually happened is that France around the 1958 obviously came up with the constitution giving the people the right to say, look, if you want to become independent, you know, this is what it's going to be like, and if you want to stay still being an extension of France territory, then you become French citizen, and so on and so forth. And there was just like because during that time there were already political parties, and we know that one of the political parties was that was actually, if you like, well welcomed, was the Progressive Party of Nigel. And amongst them there were two cousins, if you like, you know, those who emerged as being leaders, and one of them who was if you like, you know, very radical was Djibril Bakari, and then the moderate one was Diarry. So between the two of them, you can obviously imagine what the colonizers would want. They want somebody who had actually, if you like, you know, soft power, somebody that they could actually control. So in the process of time, so Diarry actually emerged as a president, because obviously he sided, if you like, you know, with the president, and, you know, used his influence in order to get the people to vote that they will stay in France as being France's territory. Now, it didn't last long, because in the 60s, by then, it was just, things were just getting out of control. They said, no, we got to grant them independent. But yes, you know, the same Diarry was again voted president of the newly independent country. And so that relationship, if you like, you know, continued and evolved in that same manner, until we get to the stage where we are now in the era of Macron. But you can understand Macron being Macron, you know, he's one guy who thinks like, you know, he can basically control and dictate what happens around the world. So he is the one basically who wanted to come with his foreign policy and then still maintain the people in these Western countries under France's control. And he wanted just to manipulate people and then continue to do things business as usual. But people obviously didn't like it, and then it basically became what it has now evolved to. So you can actually understand that the people actually were tired. They had enough of French influence, and then especially when they remember the currency that they do have. I mean, it represents a lot of things. It represents all the past traumas that they have suffered, and it represents all the traumas that people are going through now, and also France's foreign policy in their nation. I mean, all of this had to culminate into what it is now. Like I said, it's not to justify that, but it gives you a bit of a flavor, a bit of an idea why we are where we are today. So if you want to look at it this way, you're going to ask yourself, is this France? This would probably be Macron's legacy. Maybe he didn't intend for things to go this way, but it has evolved to what it has come to be right now. You know, these countries, Mali, you have Nigel, you have Burkina Faso, and these countries have now overthrown. They don't like France anymore. They're banning that anything to do with France. They want to get rid of, in fact, they have gotten rid of them. So there are people who are basically arguing and say, well, what was going to, ECOWAS can actually intervene, or this can actually, you can see France still trying to pull the strings, but the way the situation is going, I think France has basically lost control over these countries, and Russia has now an interest. This is why Russia is now stepping in order to support, in order to help these countries that are basically breaking away from the influence of the West. And Russia is gaining the, if you like, the popularity in Africa, because it stands as if someone, you are in chain and somebody is coming to help you so that you can freely emancipate yourself. So this is what Africa is now seeing Russia as doing, because of the relationship between Russia and West, which isn't good. So that kind of tie between Africa and Russia may actually help things move forward. So just wanted to give you that kind of a brief, if you like, you know, summary of the reasons as to why there is this sentiment in Africa against France. I mean, this is the time for France to learn, and I believe this will be Macron's legacy, that he has destroyed destroy whatever was left of France-Africa relationship. So this is it where it stands at the moment. I just want you to kind of have this. But where things are going at the moment, we don't know. We see that obviously the general, who's now Nigel's new president, he said that after 3 years he's going to go into elections, or at least hand power over. So we'll wait and see what is actually going to unfold. But I just wanted to sort of give you just this information so you know. I hope this is helpful to you. But yes, like I said, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe, give us thumbs up, and share this with other people so that we can obviously, I wait to hear your comment so we can exchange ideas and help Africa to move forward. Thank you. Until the next video, take care of yourself. Bye bye.